Flesh and Blood is popping off right now. I can't believe it. Everywhere I look, people are talking about this game for good reasons and for some bad reasons, right? But we have a monumental dev talk that was just put out. I have not seen it yet, but I have a feeling we're going to be diving into some of these controversial topics that have been brought up in the last couple of weeks. And I also think that LSS is going to be hinting at the future of Flesh and Blood. We know about pirates, and I personally believe this new set, The Hunted, is doing extremely well, right? I'm seeing it sold out in local game stores near me. That is wild. I've also noticed some interesting things like my card collection app, 50% year over year value going on with my cards right now. I think the game is exploding rapidly. So let's just see what the LSS team have in store for us today. In the
started dev talks with very clear focus.
Episode 11.
Transparency, communication, being open with our players, keeping those lines of dialogue open. And just straight up,
James White,
we have 5 things we got to talk about. They're just pressing issues with Flesh and Blood. And I think you're ready to talk about them. I'm ready to talk about them. Our community's ready to hear about them. Missed triggers policy.
Yep, there we go.
Definitely on everyone's mind right now.
Figured.
I want to talk about infractions in tournaments.
Okay.
Punishment for those infractions when they reset. The Hunted. Banger set, obviously. Absolute all.
So for those of you who don't know, we just had a kind of big community issue going on over the last couple of weeks where a very renowned pro player, Brody Spurlock, was caught, not really caught, was actually following the rules of the game to the point where it's kind of sharky. He basically got in at a major tournament. He got into the top 8 and actually won that tournament. But he got into the top 8 by ignoring a Command and Conquer pummel trigger. Right, so he basically just didn't swipe his arsenal into his trash can. And he cited very clearly that it was because his opponent didn't tell him about the trigger. Right, so he's following the rules to a T. And I think we'll dive into this a little bit more later. But he was abusing those rules in a lot of the community's opinion to get his way, right? And, this is a competitive game. Flesh and Blood is the biggest premier in-person tournament game, I think, out right now. And in professional sports, people do stuff like this all the time. So let's just see what happens.
All-star set coming out of the gates really, really hot. A lot of concern around some specific cards in the Hunted and their availability, thinking mostly about Hunter's Clave. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about
Assassins love to get short printed. We'll see if that's true or not.
Seas. Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
Oh, yeah.
Some timing issues, though, around high seas with regards to U.S. nationals. I want to clear those up. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about our most recent ban, which I feel like we're a little bit behind on. We needed to talk about that a little bit earlier, maybe, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the journey of discovery, all that stuff we've referenced throughout those ban and suspended announcements. But the headline topic, James, what's the deal? What's the deal with missed triggers? Are we happy with the present policy? How do we get to this policy? Is the policy changing? Talk to me about our missed triggers.
You guys, coming from other card games out there, this is, these are 2 figureheads of the game spending the time to talk to us about this. James White, Brian Gottlieb, they truly care. They're great people. They love this game. And, we just got to appreciate how much time and energy they spend and just talking to the community like this,
Policy.
Thanks, Brian. Look, the missed triggers policy is there's essentially 2 pathways that you can go down here. There's two options, and it's really important to understand that they are 2 imperfect solutions to this topic. Joshua Scott actually did a fantastic job explaining the context and the premise behind the 2 pathways that are available in a Back Alley Oracle article. I think it's number 11 that was published in July 2023. And we're going to link to that article in the video description below, so you guys can check that out.
A lot of people missed that article. They thought LSS is being quiet on their response to this, but making rules changes takes a lot of time, I'm guessing. So go check it out.
Well, look, the 2 pathways are essentially that players are responsible for their own missed triggers in general, or players are responsible for all triggers that occur in the game. Before I get into sort of the meat of this, I do want to just actually talk about our dev team, and that I really feel like oftentimes I don't get enough credit for the work that they do. And by that I mean our dev team, their job, one of their primary jobs is trying to break our game system. But not just the game system itself, the policies and the rules that sit around the game.
I mean, you guys see this all the time, right? Each set that comes out tends to have some sort of patch with it. I mean, look at the text all over Arachne, Mario's text box, right? They have to make these like weird rules interactions super clear. The dev team, all stars, man, they make an incredible game, right? So let's see.
And a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of discussions go into the policy settings that we choose to implement and run with. And there are people on our dev team who have played competitive gaming at the highest echelons. We're talking Magic the Gathering Platinum Pros and other very, very renowned and established players from our dev team. Apply their minds and critique our rules and our policies to try and find the vulnerabilities, to try and think like an elite gamer might think of how
Why are there so many pro Magic players in New Zealand?
how can I break this game in all of the different ways available.
That's interesting.
So saying that, we applied this process to Mist Triggers as well. And we spent a lot of time debating the pros and cons of the two pathways that we have
So much time in this particular debate.
available to us. It is our position that the pathway of players being responsible for all triggers in the game has some very undesirable consequences. Firstly, the fact that you can start accumulating infractions throughout a tournament for triggers that your opponent controls, that you might not be familiar with those cards.
Yeah, I mean, this is if I had to memorize every single card in every single language based on the picture on the card, and then I had to be worried about what my opponent and I are both doing at the same time while I'm playing this game. I think that'd be too much, right? Absolutely too much. Especially with the amount of heroes that are going on right now. I've sat down against people recently on Rhinar at a calling, and I flipped my hero, and they said, "What does he do?" It's a sad truth about my boy Rhinar right now. But if it was up to my opponent to know every one of my cards, I could very easily abuse that, especially with how low key my heroes tend to be. Riptide and Rhinar, there's so many weird rules interactions where I could probably I could force them to fail openly. You know what I mean?
Cards, they might not even be in the language that you can read or speak.
Yeah.
They're not cards that are
I
in your
start running
deck. You're not,
Japanese cards.
you don't frequently play with
Not
them. It
everybody
might be
can
some
read
skill
Japanese
strategy.
in
There's all
America.
of these considerations that just aren't obvious at the surface level that can really bite you. Like, you start racking up these warnings that can lead to IP penalties, to potentially game losses for cards that aren't in your deck, and you just don't have that level of deep understanding or awareness of, let alone the fact that by being responsible for your opponent's triggers, the mental burden that puts on you is just immense.
I mean, like, think about it. For those of you who don't understand, like, the level of difficulty here, like, if you're not a Brute player, you probably don't understand the rules interactions between cards like Massacre, Pulping, Wild Ride, Skullcrack, and Beast Within, right? And the way those the way those cards interact with each other, right? Pulping and Wild Ride don't work with Massacre. Why? I don't know. It's a dumb rule interaction. Beast Within's the way you can layer Beast Within triggers, right? In LL format with Beast Within and Berserk, right? All of those moving pieces, and then I can just get you an infraction for me not knowing what I'm doing. I don't know about
Like,
that.
it should
Yeah,
not be
I agree.
underestimated. Like, Flesh and Blood has a pretty complex game state as it is. Just having to monitor your own side of the table, let alone having to keep track of these, like, every single trigger that your opponent may control as well. So I just think it's an unreasonable mental burden to put on players, and that is something that we talked about a lot during the process of committing to the pathway that we went down. I have a personal story to share as well of the consequence or the outcome that can exist when you have a shared responsibility to track all triggers. And look, back in my teenage years and early 20s, that I've spoken to on many occasions, I played Magic really competitive, actually, around the world playing. And in those early stages of Magic, from its inception through to 2006, players were responsible just for their own triggers, and then Magic changed their policy, and they made players responsible for all triggers in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And
I just noticed the helmet right there on the back, right? That's sick. The art on the wall is pretty sick too. I wonder who drew that.
As I reached my late 20s, my life changed quite a bit, and I ended up having a hiatus from Magic. We started our business, our national distribution company, and I played a lot less Magic, and still play from time to time. Eventually, my life changed. I ended up living in China for a while with my wife, and we had a business up in China focused on exporting New Zealand products up there, and running New Zealand pavilions at big like state level expos. And during that time, I was like quite disconnected from Magic and TCGs in general. But during sort of the end of that time that I was up in China with my wife Cece, there was a Grand Prix that came to Shanghai, Grand Prix Shanghai 2012. It was M13 Limited, and I just was kind of craving to play some TCG. To be honest, the work that we were doing up there wasn't very fulfilling, and it was actually one of the reasons that led to coming back to the industry and really embarking on the journey to create Flesh and Blood. Is like, I knew where my heart was, and I wanted to come home.
Sure, I've been there.
And I'd worked really, really hard to support this other business that was really something that Cece was very passionate about, and she was like, okay, you've given it your best shot, helping me on the thing I wanted.
If you guys don't know the story of Flesh and Blood, definitely go look it up. There's a bunch of videos out there, but like what James White did is nuts, right? The things he sacrificed to make this game come out, selling his Magic collection, like you said, it's wild. Go watch it.
And I was like, she really supported me to go and pursue my greatest love and passion, which was the TCG industry. So there was kind of a moment in my life journey where I was like, yeah, it's time to come home. And going to that Grand Prix was kind of like the first step through the door, I guess. So anyway, M13 Grand Prix in Shanghai 2012, and like again, I hadn't played competitive Magic for quite a while at that point. I was a bit rusty, and I was playing the tournament, and in one of the runs, my opponent he played Angelic Benevolence or something. That's a 4-drop white enchantment that has a triggered ability. When you attack with one creature, you can tap your opponent's creature, and it has Exalted. So if you ever attack one creature, that creature gets +1/+1. And the opponent attacks me, and he taps down my creature and doesn't give his creature +1/+1. And we do combat damage, and we both agree, okay, I'm taking this much damage. And then turn passes over to me, and I start doing my turn and playing a creature or attacking or whatever, and then the opponent realizes, oh, actually you should have taken one more damage. I'm like, oh, dude, you missed the trigger. And he's like, oh, that's not how it works. You should have told me that I missed the trigger. I'm like, why am I responsible for telling you
your triggers?
He's like, calls the judge over. Judge comes over. And it's like, yeah, no, you should have told him that trigger should have applied. It's like, did you know that he missed a trigger? I'm like, yeah, like, why would I remind him to apply the trigger? It's like, because it's your responsibility. I'm giving you a game loss. He calls over the head judge. They start to do ridiculous. A DQ investigation. Because I intentionally didn't remind him of his trigger, and I was honest about it.
Yeah.
I always find that, the systems, man, some of the early DQs, ridiculous, good players getting punished for mistakes and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a weird one, like especially in Magic, there's so many cards. You'd have to memorize so many things. I mean, I guess if you're competing, right? But at the end of the day, not everybody's trying to be an all-star, right? They're just trying to have fun. They want to get their one shot, they want to get their top 8. Having somebody memorize 36,000 cards, and then I don't know, that's too much for me.
And anyway, I don't get DQ. I do get the game loss. I think I may have even gone on to win that match. I can't remember, but it's kind of beside the point. We play a few more rounds, and I'm in another situation where it's like my opponent has missed a trigger. This time, the trigger, if he remembers it, I am going to lose the game, and I'm stuck in the situation where it's like, okay, cool. So I can remind my opponent about this trigger and lose the game, or I can not remind him about the trigger, and if the opponent or a judge becomes aware of this, I'm definitely going to get DQ'd. So of course, I remind him about the trigger and lose the game. And I just walked away from that experience thinking, okay, I'm playing at a Grand Prix, this is a professional level event. Why am I responsible for helping my opponent beat me? It just...
Yeah, here's where I'm going to change it up a little bit. You know, I do think that in a defined game structure like chess, think chess, checkers, think Go, right? Your rules are kind of your cards are equivalent to pieces, and your pieces in chess can only do certain things, right? And it's not like reminding your opponent. I don't know. This one's kind of weird for me because like if your opponent is forgetting to do a thing that is printed on the card, I feel like that is it's like a piece of chess, you know? Like it can't not do that thing, you know? It's not like you get to just move your pawn half a space, right? It has to move the full space. It's got to do what it does. You know, when it hits the end, it flips into a queen or whatever you want, you know? Like in card games, I do find it really weird that like you can have a card that does a thing, but it won't do the thing if you forget. I don't know. That's always bothered me a little bit. I am new to cards, right? So I'm new to Flesh and Blood. I mean, this is my first card game. So I do think that's super weird rule.
just felt
I've
so wrong.
always felt weird about it.
And I walked away with a very poor experience as someone who really appreciates competitive gaming. I feel at the professional level, and very specifically professional, I'm not talking about in-store armories or Friday Mage, I'm talking about professional level tournaments.
Yeah.
I believe you should not be responsible for helping your opponent beat you or reminding them of their missed triggers. So that's a personal story.
Yeah.
We didn't choose our policy setting based on just that story. It's based on the opinion of our broader team. But I think that is an interesting and very relevant and applicable example of how being responsible for the shared triggers or shared responsibility for all triggers in the game state actually leads to some pretty poor outcomes in terms of competitive player experience.
You know, I do almost, I don't know, this is a weird one because both sides of the table have such glaring flaws, but like at the end of the day, do you feel super good about winning a match when your opponent makes a glaring mistake like that? No, right? Do you deserve to win? No. You know, not really, right? Like, sure, they forgot their rules, but like these tournaments go on for 10 hours over the span of 2 days, right? You're going for 20 hours sometimes. And it's like every time I've ever won on like a technicality, like I just kind of went to the next round being like, I don't know, man. I don't feel so good about that, right? And I've always just kind of made it my business to like help my opponent a little bit, right? Like, I don't know.
I also would just point out that Magic walked this policy back in 2013.
Yeah.
They
Super
binned
fair.
off that mistrigger policy and they went back to making players only responsible for their own triggers.
Yeah, there's
It's
too
a
many
bad
holes.
policy
Too many
at the
holes.
competitive level.
Yeah.
So I would say that at the competitive level, at the professional level, particularly at the calling and the Pro Tour and the World Championship level, you need to be responsible for resolving your triggers. If your Command and Conquer hits, make sure your opponent bins off their arsenal. If you pummel a card, make sure your opponent discards a card. And yeah, you can say, look, it's unsportsmanlike, it's not the right thing to do, blah, blah. It's just how the rules or the policy works, and it's the lesser of two evils for missing triggers for an in-person paper game.
totally fair. But at the same time, you know you're going to have people abusing this, right? So there's got to be a clause in the rules that allows you to walk these things back. Because I have actually had this happen in a tournament. Actually had this happen. I was playing at the Calling San Jose, fighting for top 8, mind you. So if I lose one game, I'm out of top 8. And I'm playing against a Briar player. And the Briar player pretended that they didn't know what my cards did, which is fine the first time, right? I put down a intimidating attacking 6 yellow, right? Or red. Sorry, pack call, right? I put down a pack call. My opponent just puts 2 cards on the table, defends it, right? There's an intimidate trigger that we missed on the stack. Now, he's like, hey, I didn't know it did that. Sorry. And I'm like, okay, cool, great. Whatever, it's an intimidation. We could call a judge. I don't know, okay, fine. And so then I just let him block. It doesn't gonna matter. I was crushing him. Doesn't matter. Truly doesn't matter. I'm going to beat the shit out of him anyways. And then he attacks me. It comes back to my turn, and I put another intimidating card down, and he double blocks. And I go, hey, dude. And this time, I'm starting to, he's been kind of agitated all game. He's not happy that I've double blood rushed. He's not happy I'm winning. It is like this is like the second to last game before the top 8 cut. He's cutting me off right now, right? He is cheating, absolutely cheating. And I call him out on it, right? I'm like, dude, this is the second time my cards say intimidate. You cannot put your cards down until I resolve intimidate. And then I call the judge, right? And I win that judge call because it happened twice. The 2 people to my right and left also kind of vouched for me at the time. But that I had people backing me up that game, right? There's so many people who will take advantage of these types of systems,
So one thing I'll say, I think there's a benefit.
Crushed him.
To
Andy was mad.
This policy, in that should you want to take this pathway of requiring your opponent to acknowledge their own triggers and only responding to triggers that they do point out very clearly, you have to do so in a very clear fashion. It's just very obvious that you are taking this line. You're not taking this action until specifically you say trigger, and then you move the card to the graveyard. And I think that's all good. The alternative allows you to do some very deceptive things and feign ignorance in scenarios or move in such a fashion to obscure things for your opponent, quickly move past any triggers you may create and then get them not acknowledging those triggers. Even if it's in your own deck, it's not something they necessarily have awareness of. If you move quickly and move past that trigger, they miss it. Very easy to call a judge at that point and call them out. So I think it is far more exploitable to have a system of shared responsibility. And this just leaves a place where, yes, there is this requirement of acknowledge your triggers, state your triggers, say the word trigger. That's it. That's all you have to do. It is just saying the word trigger. And the game will progress to its state as written on the cards.
I'll be honest. I would hope that most players, when the Command and Conquer hits, just put the arsenal into the graveyard without having to be asked. I would hope that.
That would be my approach always. And
yeah, dude, common sense. Come on, kids.
I think it's the vast majority of players' approaches.
I agree. Yep. But as the player who is controlling the Command and Conquer, you just got to make sure that that's actually what happens.
Yeah, sure. I agree. But I also think that it's bullshit that you have to be like that. Like it goes back to that chess reference. My Command and Conquer says if this hits you, your arsenal's dead. That does not mean you can attempt to ignore it, and that you should feel good about that.
Interesting. I mean, it's a policy that is sort of fraught with peril on both sides. As we mentioned, there are no perfect solutions. So many times when we're doing these policy discussions, if you want to bring me the perfect policy, I promise we will put it into place immediately. And we spent so much time around this issue. I remember hours and hours of meetings talking over all these possibilities and just trying to get to the best place. There is no perfect policy. Bottom line, we will not be able to solve this issue. So we have to make trade-offs, and we have to figure out which is best for the long term. Just feel of our game, the type of environment we're trying to create. And we believe this is the best policy for that.
Absolutely. Yep. Agree. Infractions and resetting at the start of tournaments. I think that this is a separate topic, and it's also something the community has been talking about a lot recently. And I do think that this is an area of our policy that is flawed.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
it's not as simple as just changing the policy, though. It's the best that we can do right now, but it is not optimal. And the piece of the puzzle that is missing to actually make the policy better is gem infrastructure.
Yeah.
I believe that we need our infractions to have some
Duration.
some persistence across events.
Yeah.
It should not be isolated to just.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, right, during an event, you get infractions. Those infractions are held, don't quote me on this, but outside of GEM. They're actually held inside of a judging software that is kind of custom built by, whatever. So those infractions you get don't carry over from event to event. And now if you're a player who is an intelligent player, who knows that you can break the rules a handful of times an event, and then you will not get punished for them next event, you have full power to abuse that rule, right? So I think what they're talking about clearly here is slow playing, And so if you get just enough slow play triggers every single tournament you go to, but not enough to get a full infraction, nothing happens to you perpetually. Even if you travel to, let's just say, basically every event on the continent and in the world, right? So you can hit a Flesh and Blood event every single weekend currently, do something that is slightly against the rules, but not bad enough to get an infraction, and nothing will happen to you. And so I think this is huge win for the community.
An event and reset event to event. And something that, I'll be honest, it upsets me to see some players view the current policy settings around the infractions resetting as this like replenishable resource. It's like it feels like there's a bit of a mindset that you start each game with 40 life points.
Yeah.
And you start each tournament with 2 infractions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And once those 2 infractions are expended, then, for example, you start playing at a reasonable pace.
Yeah.
That's just not okay.
No.
It is not an expendable, replenishable resource to be exploited in that way. And we are certainly going to tighten that up as soon as we have the gem infrastructure to support event-to-event monitoring of this. But even in the interim, accumulation of infractions and this demonstrated repeat behavior to exploit it as this replenishable resource is not going to be tolerated. It's completely against the spirit of the game and competitive play and the rules and policies. And you will see action taken on this.
I do want to say, I think with regards to accumulated infractions, there may be a desire from the player base to say, hey, well, how many infractions can I accumulate? What is the number before things start to become problematic? And frankly, if we were to answer that question, then we're right back in the same scenario where you can go, oh, if I get 8 accumulated infractions, then I'll get in trouble. So I'll pick up 7 and I'll keep track of that. So that's not the way the policy is going to work. While we may need greater tracking capabilities across GEM, it's not going to be like we're ever going to lay out, oh, if you get this many.
So I think marrying these two thoughts together, right? So carrying over infractions mixed with the whole concept that they talked about earlier about the lack of shared responsibility, right? And we know why that there's no, they've tried it in Magic. They've tried it in other games. It doesn't work. There's too many cards. There's too many rules. But this, I think marrying these two policies together is actually a very good solve for a lot of the problems that are going on right now, because Flesh and Blood has a tremendous amount of money on the table. $1.5 million this year, right? Player of the Year, $25,000, right? Some of these major tournament wins, tens and tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So it's just like every other sport, right? Every other sport, people are breaking the rules. Look at like Lance Armstrong, dude. Look at Barry, right? Baseball, basketball, football, Olympics, right? Every one of those sports has a rule, and that rule is don't do steroids, right? But the actual rule is don't do steroids or don't get caught doing them on certain dates, right? And that's what's enforced. So the rule was designed with this idea that nobody's going to break this rule, but it has a poor implementation, and it can't really be implemented any better than that. Otherwise, you're basically asking people to take drug tests every second of every day, right? There's just no way to enforce a rule that broad, right? And so Flesh and Blood has the same problem. The only difference is steroids make sports more fun to watch. Watching somebody intentionally break a trigger isn't as fun to watch. So this, might be why sports aren't fixing this problem as aggressively as LSS is fixing theirs. But at the end of the day, pro players are going to push the rules, right? They're going to push it. They're going to push it as hard as they can because they want $50,000. They want 25 grand. They want that shiny, shiny gold cardboard. They want to keep justifying traveling around the planet, going to these events. So having a rule that is opaque and in the control of judge and LSS staff that isn't super written down so it can be abused easily, very smart.
Any across 4 tournaments or your average across tournaments is this many infractions, expect punishment. It is just going to be something that we want better resources around tracking. We are using some interim resources, as you mentioned, to go ahead and track these penalties efficiently. We're just going to get better about tracking is what's going to happen. But I don't think players should expect to get a hard number policy at any point in the future.
I really like this.
Agree.
Huge W.
Anything else you wanted to come?
No, I want to stop talking about policy. I make fun of Josh. He always drags me into these policy meetings, and I'm like, I can't do this again, Josh. Please, not today. But honestly, it's a very important part of our game.
It is.
And I'm happy to put in the hours for it. But we put in a lot of hours, and it's a huge amount of effort, and it's contentious as well. Like, people see these things very differently. And I don't think just because you have a different opinion around trigger policy, I don't think you're wrong. I think there's so many upsides, so many downsides, and it's just about what you're prioritizing the game system for.
Absolutely.
And we're always going to revisit these things too. I think is the important thing to remember. These policies are never set in stone. In fact, we're going to talk policy this coming week. We're going to have a sit down and reflect on all these things that have kind of transpired over the past few weeks. So that's just a constant part of our approach. I do find policy talk draining, but it's obviously so important for our game.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the kind of experience that we're creating, there's so many moving parts. Obviously, making a great game, like the product part of it is one complex component. And the events themselves, all of the logistics, timing, planning, locations, event staff, judge program training, all of these things, it's another complex moving part. Policy, rule settings is another pillar that's really important and really complex. And all 3 of these pillars really we're always learning, we're always reviewing, reflecting, listening to feedback, checking our premise all the time. I mean, even this topic around missed triggers, I was like, we came back to the table, it was like, have we got this right?
Yep. It's one thing LSS does really well is listen to community feedback and take action on it. And you cannot say that about a lot of other games. And I think most people in the community, 90+% of the people in the community are going to follow the rules as they're intended. And I think that's the big thing, is the intention of the rules is very different than the way the rules are being handled by this explicit player and probably by another handful of people in the community, right? There are probably some other pro players who do similar things. These guys are on teams. These people are on teams who talk, train, travel, invest money, right? They're trying to get an ROI here. So if the rule can be bent, it will probably be bent, right? So it's really incredible that LSS is actioning this so fast. And for those of you who don't know, the player that kind of spurred a lot of these things has been suspended. So action has been taken.
That was the starting point of all the discussion we've had around this, by the way, is just are we still comfortable with
remind ourselves why we went down this pathway, and we still hold that position. Like, yes, this is the correct policy, and okay, even, reach out across the aisle to some of our peers in the industry, Magic the Gathering, been around for 31 years. They're still refining, they're still evolving.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, a lot of thought, a lot of effort, a lot of trying different things and learning from them, and it's a never ending quest. We're committed to it, and I think we're mostly in a pretty good place. And I really do have a lot of appreciation for Joshua Scott. He takes his job very, very seriously,
he does,
very
man.
seriously,
He
and
does.
puts a
He's also
lot
great
of work
cosplayer.
into reviewing and refining the tournament, the comprehensive rules and the tournament rules and policy. And not only that, but the efforts that he puts in to communicate to the community as well, with the Back Alley Oracle articles,
Yep.
the Rules Reprise articles, and of course, the judge program. We've got thousands and thousands of judges around the world that Josh is, and Klaus, Nico,
Love Klaus. Love
sorry, Nicolo.
Nico.
Sorry, my apologies, Nicolo. Are working very hard to disseminate, these rules and policies out to the judge community to put on these events for our fans around the world. So it's not for a lack of trying. I can promise you that.
I know a lot of people got mad at the judges in question over that one call that happened. Don't do that, dude, or madam. Don't do that. Okay, the judges are following the rules. The judges in this game are fantastic people. I love them. They travel all over the world just like we do, and they don't make the same amount of money as the players, right? So honestly, because the rule doesn't make sense to you, does not mean you should take it out on a judge ever.
100%.
They will follow
All
the
right,
rules.
next topic. A
That's what
topic
their
I'm
job
much
is.
more happy to talk about: the Hunted.
Wow, what a banger!
Banger.
Look, I just want to put it out
Huge
there.
set.
You've talked before publicly about our
Huge
hype
set.
cycles and
Yes.
how we
Call it-
always
call
are
it now.
looking at ebbs and flows of hype, and not everything can be up here. And
Yeah,
I don't think we had this level of expectation for the hype that has developed around the Hunted. It's
True.
blowing
Sold
the
out.
doors up. Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, absolutely overperforming. And there's
Glad
a lot
to
to
hear it's
reflect on there.
overperforming.
We talk about always learning, always reflecting. People love this set, and we're going to think a lot about why people love this set. But there have been some consequences from the love of this set. One that stands out, I know, probably to our fans, to you, Hunter's Clave. Just a very, very hard card to acquire right now.
Yeah, what's
You
up
want to
with
talk about what's
assassin
going on with
cards?
that card?
yeah.
Let's see.
I mean, firstly, it's kind of shocking to see where it's sitting out on the
$75 right now. I
on the
think.
marketplace. But look, I want to talk about our philosophy and approach towards printing cards that you need less than like a playset. Like you don't typically you want 3 of a card, right? Like a Majestic, you need 3 of it to potentially max out the number that you can put into a deck. When a card has the legendary keyword, you can only have 1 in a deck, or weapons in particular that you need less than 3 of. We do adjust the frequency of those cards in products out of consideration
Makes
to
sense.
players. You do not want to be flooded with cards that you need less than 3 of.
Yeah, like it's annoying after you get your first ball breaker and heavy hitters, you crack like 44 more of them, and you're like, what am I going to do with this? However, it is unfortunate. Assassins, super hype, right? But what LSS has done with Assassins is wild. They have such an interesting take on what an assassin actually is. The class thematics that they've managed to carve out over these last couple of years with Assassins, or it's like last year and a half, they've carved out is nuts. The fandom behind Assassins is nuts. The class is wildly unique, and people love it. And the new ones are so interesting. Such a good job. It's too bad they're
So
horrible to play against as a group.
we adjust those levers out of consideration so that you're just not overloaded with cards that you just don't need 3 of to play the game.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hunter's Clave is printed at exactly the correct quantity, just like other weapons that we've made in the past, like the other assassin daggers.
So no mistakes.
There's no mistakes
This isn't a
with
surgical
this.
extraction.
Stop buying them for $75, dude.
So
types.
it is not a
Just
surgical
let
extraction
them
or
go
whoops, it
back
got left
down.
off the print
People are
sheet. It is
taking
printed at
advantage of you.
exactly the drop rate that we would assign a weapon such as Hunter's Clave, one-handed weapon. Consistent with the precedent that has been used in the past. literally with the other assassin daggers like Orbital class
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah,
Yep.
man,
Yep.
they're everywhere. So
I think
Stuff's
one
all-
of the factors that's
somebody's
going on
holding
is
them.
just the tremendous popularity of this set. It is
yes,
selling.
Yes.
Sometimes markets are irrational as well.
It is hard to get product for some folks right now, and I think that will change over
Yeah.
the coming weeks for sure.
Yeah,
We'll see
for
more
sure.
product hit the market.
Yeah, but yeah, again, this is not a mistake. It is not a gotcha. Oh, we're just going to short print this. It isn't. It's decisions that are made out of consideration to players to try and get the
LSS has always been super transparent about their printing numbers, the rarity of cards, and if they made a mistake. So anytime a new set comes out and people are buying these cards, like, it makes no sense to me. They're buying these cards for $75 on TCG Player. Like, just wait 2 months or a month. Just wait a month, borrow one.
relative drop rates or frequencies of our cards aligned with how many people would typically want to own.
LSS
Yeah, and
will
I think
also
this is
tell you.
important because, like, look, our fan base is always growing. There's always new people coming into our community, and we talk about this in the past as well. That cards that are legendary stamped, like Pulse of Isenloft, as an example, you only need one of that card, so it appears less frequently. We've talked about this many times in the past, but
Mhm.
our fan base is always growing, and I think a lot of people
No
maybe
secrets.
aren't aware of that. And like, that's a situation with Hunter's Clave, and again, we do it out of consideration to people just not opening endless amounts of cards that are just not needed.
Yeah, I think another factor in this has been the demand for these cards has been immediate.
Yeah.
Of course, with the Calling
Yeah.
Memphis having
Yes.
a release week
One
calling,
fair
I think
point.
that drove some of that behavior around cards like Hunter's Clave. So it's important
Yep.
for us to talk, I think, about U.S. Nationals and
Yes.
the release of High Seas, which will bring so much excitement. I'm
Ugh,
quite sure of
Pirate
that.
set.
But
Pirate set.
there's going to be a tournament, basically release week. Talk about some of the things we're doing to make sure players are not really stuck with a very hard time getting their hands on these cards, or
Yeah, this is an
even
interesting
practicing,
one.
say, the limited format before we head to this U.S. Nationals.
Sure. So it actually started with the Hunted. We had a change in our pre-release and retail policy from the Hunted. It's available on the Retail and News Center for those who are interested. You can go and look at the Hunted pre-release FAQ. The change was that retailers are allowed to sell product from pre-release weekend. It is, well, for the Hunted, it was unlimited quantities. They were able to buy one additional case for each pre-release kit that they were allocated, and they could use that case either for pricing if they wanted to, for offering drafts alongside the pre-release, or to just simply sell to the fans who were in store, either on pre-release weekend or in that week following through to release. The reason it was restricted to just one additional case purchase per pre-release kit was there was some logistics and supply chain issues around the Hunter of just getting enough product into the market for pre-release weekend. For High Seas, we are aiming to get a lot more product into the market. Things are in a much better place in terms of manufacturing and supply chain.
So for those who don't know, one of the major events of the year is falling on the exact release week of the next set, which is a problem for quite a few players. Especially those who are maybe one tier below pro, I would say, or on a competitive team, because teams can kind of get together really fast and gather product, grind it out, and kind of like play the game, Pro-ish players, or like even pro players who aren't necessarily on like a really solid infrastructure team, have a much harder time doing that at scale. Now we do have tools in the market. Now we have we have fan made tools that allow you to draft and do things like that. And it's a little bit more open. Granted, one of the drafting tools owned by a team who gets all the data, but whatever. So some players are really worried about it. It's like, how am I going to get the product? What if that hero's busted and I can't get product in time? And how am I going to practice against these teams? So kind of a fair answer, it is an interesting situation to be in. I think in Flesh and Blood, I've seen pro players go into a draft with like zero practice and do very, very well and win their local game store level. But there are some people out there who do not do as well. with short notice. So there's some people who are like methodical practicers versus like instinct runners. And I'm not saying maybe this event just won't be yours if you're a methodical practicer. And I think that's kind of cool. Maybe every once in a while.
So we do expect there to be a lot more product available, especially in the US, which we are prioritizing because of the timing of the US Nationals, so that stores who are running pre-release should have a good amount of product available to purchase on pre-release weekend, offer drafts, so players in the US have good access to cards, good access to drafting and opportunities to prepare themselves for the US National Champs. We're also going to be working with the vendors who are going to US National Champs to make sure that they have inventory far enough in advance to break it down, to process, to make singles plentifully available at the US National Championship.
Do you think it's fair to say that the time frame between general availability of these cards and the tournament is in fact similar to the way it was at last US Nationals?
I mean, let's all be honest. We all do all of our scouting online anyways. We use online tools to test before products come out, and this was even before things like Talishar existed. My group of friends would import the cards manually into Tabletop Simulator and do drafts weeks before anybody else could do it. And that was not a team, kind of a team, but it was, just like 3 people and one person spent the time to do it.
Where it was the first Nationals up, it was very soon after the release of MST.
Get my hands on
is it sort of in that same type of time frame?
Yeah, and I would also say that we, the world premiere is 2 weeks before US Nationals, right? So the whole set will be known from world premiere weekend.
Spoilers.
And people can go out there and start testing and brewing, get your Sharpies out there and writing on your chaff cards to make up your decks and start testing. And then get down to your local game stores for pre-release weekend, acquire your product, play a bunch of events. Pre-releases are going to be changing quite a lot from high seas onwards as well, where stores will be able to run multiple pre-releases. We're going to be encouraging stores to offer drafts on pre-release weekend. I have no idea why we weren't doing that prior. It's just crazy. So stores, please start offering drafts.
Yeah, interesting.
Ups to players on pre-release weekends.
Yeah, right.
And I think that
that is one interesting thing about the game is that drafting isn't as popular as CC. Of course, I think that is obvious, but some areas do have a much harder time getting drafts. Like, say in the Portland area, it is relatively difficult to get solid drafting in, right? Whereas in Canada, it is the best place in the PNW kind of. You count Canada as part of the PNW to get your draft in, right? Like when I was trying to learn draft, I actually talked to the Canadian players. I was like, dude, let me just come stay with you guys for like 2 weeks, because in those 2 weeks, I'll learn more about drafting than I will the entire 6 months down here in Portland. So it is nice to see more opportunities at game stores being pushed.
I hope that the fans in the US see this as an exciting opportunity to be the first country to have the national champs. You get to set the pace. You get to set, the tone for the rest of the world to follow for national champ season. I always remember, back when I was playing competitive Magic, I always loved it when New Zealand Nationals was like at the front end of the season, and you felt like you could really, break out new innovation and technology before the rest of the world had a chance to, unleash it.
Yeah.
So for the deck brewers out there, the opportunity is ripe to express your creativity and your
new Riptide deck,
your brilliance at taking the cards in high seas. It's a really exciting set. Love the set. Hopefully we see it shake up the metagame, much like we've seen the Hunted.
Absolutely.
The incredible Syndra. Reshape the metagame in a big way.
Yeah.
It's a topic for coming up next. But that's where we're at for high seas. And US Nationals, and look, it's all by design. This is intentional. We see this as being a feature and a highlight for the US players, and hopefully you guys get to set the world ablaze and inspire your fellow gamers all around the world to get down to the national championship and unleash whatever brilliant technology you show the world first up.
Pirate set. It's going to be nuts no matter what, dude. Doesn't matter.
I think the segues really well into the next point, and it's sort of about how good our players are now. How
So
quickly they can figure things
So
out.
good.
I mean, you look no further than Syndra winning 2 callings
Yeah.
already, just
Yeah.
immediately upon her release. And I'm looking at early RTN numbers. They're not quite finalized right now, but
Is it because the players are good or because the deck's good?
Syndra, Marionette, both in the top 5 for most winningest heroes. So those decks getting figured out
I don't
very
know.
quickly.
I mean, come on. The players are good, of course, and we have all the online tools. We've been playing we've been playing with these cards much longer than they have been out, right? We've been kind of playing with these cards since the first few were spoiled. You know what I mean? We've been playing with Arachne, OG Arachne, with some of the new cards way back. But it's kind of like MST, I think, where MST also quickly found some very competitive decks, and that's because those decks were pushed, right? Heavy hitters, there's still some heroes who have like no LL points from that set.
Slippy doing very well.
Mm.
Arachne
And we've
Slippy's
had plenty of
cracked.
time
Yep.
to figure 'em
Just
out.
coming off of a top 4 performance in calling here in
Slippy's
Christchurch.
good.
Jason
It's
Long.
just Arachne,
Yep,
but
good on
better.
you.
Impressive
Yeah,
stuff.
very impressive.
And
Original
he's putting up
Arachne,
good
but
numbers.
better.
Fang also won an RTN. I know that's kind of like the dark horse hero right now. I think
Fang
people are
is
still,
mid.
getting their
That's
Fang
sick.
deck list sorting out. I know folks like Xing Sang played Fang to a top 8.
You know who else won a RTN? Reinar. Doesn't mean anything, dude. I think Syndra's pushed. Arachne's pretty good. And MST heroes are still gonna reign, with Vis.
At his road to nationals. So a lot of interest in that hero, still sorting that one out. But in general, folks have moved through this hunted season very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Found good decks very quickly. And in fact, I think they found the best deck before the set even was released, and that is Zephyr Needle Ira, a deck that we took
Yep.
action on before even the release of the set. And in our banning
Everybody
of Zephyr
knew
Needle,
Ira
we
was
talked
gonna
a
be
bit
broken,
about this
though,
journey
as
of
soon as we saw
discovery,
those
wanting
cards.
players to have the
That's-
chance to find these powerful
I actually
strategies.
don't know. I truly actually don't know if they left Needle in, if she would be undisputed best deck, though.
I
actually
think
don't know if I
the
believe it. I think it's a good ban.
maturity of our player base, the knowledge they now have around Flesh and Blood, the tools they use to explore Flesh and Blood in these early weeks have fundamentally changed how we have to engage with our players.
Yeah.
We should have, frankly, banned Zephyr Needle earlier than we did. We were about a week later than we should have been. I think it should have happened before the entire set was revealed. We did the next best thing.
It's kind of fun to let everybody freak out about it for a week, though. I don't know.
I think it
Content
came up
was
as soon
made.
as possible and really put out an
S-tier?
awesome metagame.
Incredible
This hunted
metagame.
release.
Incredible. Maybe the best.
Yeah.
Maybe the best ever.
It could go down as the best ever metagame. But my
I'm gonna say heavy
more
hitters,
immediate point
but
is
I could
you
get
should
it. A lot
expect
of
us to
people love
take
this set.
earlier action in the future. We just know our players well enough now. They're going to find these decks. They're going to succeed. And leaving behind these super powerful decks, it's going to be something we try to do less in the future. Not to say strong decks aren't going to get through.
I think that's actually
Sure, maybe we'll miss
Fair
something.
point.
That's always
I think this is a fair point because they also kind of did it with the LL format recently. For those of you who don't know, where they like kind of knew that there's a super busted thing that could happen if you like really spent some time on it, and then it turns out like we found it in a tournament in like the first week, and basically one shot anybody living in the Living Legend format by drawing 1 million cards and then doing 100,000 damage with fire breathing. Right, there's some other implications with the books, right? So players are finding these things super fast. The game is being downloaded a lot faster. There's way more players, and we have a lot more tools to figure these things out now.
in the range of
And a pro
possibility.
player
But you
community
can
base who's,
expect
like, super
that when
familiar
we
with the
know
balancing.
something pushes against those power limits, we're not going to take the approach of, let's give them a 4-week season to go ahead and sort this one
We've
out.
learned our lesson on that one, mate.
Yep. Yeah, I think we got
The
most of the
books.
way there with, the Verdant spans in
There you
Living
go, that's-
Legend. And
yeah.
we were always thinking
LL
around
format
Zephyr
I was
Needle. We
talking
had all
about.
these conversations in advance. We shared our internal Slacks where we were talking about this months and months ago. But we didn't quite commit to just pull the trigger before it even hits. And I think that's where we're at going
Honestly,
forward from this
wouldn't
point.
blame him either
Yeah,
way.
indeed.
I think it's fair.
It's just
Good
what
call.
well said. You covered it all.
But
Cool.
honestly,
So let's
I
just
kinda
talk
like the idea of having one
Road
crazy
to
week or
Nationals.
two, but
I spoiled
I
some
get
of
why
those
they don't
numbers.
want to
Our
do that.
top 5 heroes right now, I'm looking at New at the top of the list. These aren't final numbers, so this may change as we
It
finalize the
turns out
results
to
for
be
the week.
Viserai.
But New is sitting on top right now. Viserai close behind. Aurora in third place. Then you get down to Syndra
Syndra
and
came up
Marionette,
too.
are two newcomers on the scene.
Yeah.
But
I'll put it on the screen.
the spread is all over the place. I think I'm counting 20 plus heroes that have taken down a Road to Nationals
Incredible.
thus far. And then there's heroes that are not even performing in this Road to National season yet that are crushing it on the battle hardened
Yeah.
circuit. The two heroes I really want to call out,
Yeah.
Verdance,
Yeah.
with the win in the hands of Majin Bay and a
Yeah.
second place finish in the hands of Arthur Trahay.
Big names.
And then Jarl winning a battle hardened. Jarl's
Yeah.
only on the board in RTN season
Jarl's
for one win thus far. You
Yeah.
have to think these two heroes, and Verdance is the same, only one win RTN season thus far. You have to think things change in a big way come next week.
Surely. Look, Yao won that Battle Harden. They had a top 8 featuring Pablo Pintor, Arthur Trahay, 2 Pro Tour champions.
Yeah.
100 plus person event. This was not a small tournament. This was not an untalented tournament. This was a real piece of competition with a Verdance versus Jarl finals.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah.
I think
What a
that just goes to show how much evolution there still is left in this metagame. How about on your end? What are the heroes you're really focused on besides those two? Is there anyone you're expecting to have a breakout that maybe folks aren't really focused on yet? Or what about the progression to Living Legend? How about these dominoes that are going to fall as we move through these weeks?
Yep.
Living Legend format keeps getting more and more spicy. But I do think we're going to see a lot of assassins this season. Of course, assassins are a little bit pushed. They get a lot of cards. So we're going to see a lot of assassins dominating the metagame. Viserai will LL next week, probably. I'm going to call it right now. Next month, Viserai is gone. And Viserai right now is completely, probably the most represented deck in every single tournament in every single format. And he does pretty well. Right. So I think Viserai is gone. And then you might see some of the assassins trickle out. You might see Zen finally kind of hit his way. But yeah, I think Viserai is gone soon. And that's going to open up a lot of room because Viserai is the one aggro deck that is pushing your ability to fatigue, right? Like he kind of anti-fatigues you because he just builds this ramping engine. Riptide becomes suddenly very delicious. Reinar actually becomes pretty good. Levia becomes pretty good again if Viserai leaves. But like weird versions of them.
Look, I think,
Weird versions.
firstly, I just want to say
versions.
how pleased I am with Syndra coming out hot. She looks exciting on camera. I've really
Yes.
enjoyed watching the live streams over the last
Flicking
couple of
knives
weeks
is a
and
really elegant
seeing-
movement and really,
seeing her in action. She from
it just
a
does
view,
3 to 4
viewership
damage, but
point
like
of
the way it happens.
point of view, I
is
think
more
that she's
interesting.
just very enjoyable to watch, and the way that ninjas get to leverage Mask of Momentum in a
yeah.
very new way.
Poor Katsu, dude.
Yeah, obviously the whole
WTR
Flick Knives thing with Mask was
Still
always a
all
thing, but
here.
it was the cost was too high. You just couldn't like bin off a
Yeah.
Kadachi
For sure.
to in the same way that you obviously can with the kunai. So it's very nice seeing one of the old like the OG staples, right? The OG face cards of Flesh and Blood, Mask of Momentum, really like come back into the spotlight, have its moment again.
Yeah.
So very pleasing with that. Look, it's fantastic to see Yo rise up finally.
Jarl's
I
gonna
mean,
be a good deck soon.
We were originally planning for Yo to release a little bit later, right? But we had a good we had a finger on the pulse of what we thought this metagame would look like internally
As
with
soon
Dev,
as
and we made the
Enigma's
decision
gone,
to
Guardians
actually
come
bring
back.
Yo,
And then they'll
forward
release
to
an
release
illusionist,
before
but there'll
Syndra,
be a
and
short
these
period
red
of
line
time where
dragonic
Guardians
decks
are gonna be
hit
good again,
the
'cause I think
metagame
he's
so that
strong.
players had deck building agency to engage with these resource light decks in the form of ice. So
Yeah.
I'm very pleased that we did that, and there is some real paper scissors rock, I think, that's going to start to shake out as this metagame matures and goes forward. And again, seeing Verdance rising up, like one of the best ways to combat small parcels of damage, those 1 point parcel of damage is life gain. So
Yep.
surely that is a big part of why Verdance is rising up, is just her
Awesome
ability to
margins.
favorably interact with
Beast.
daggers, flick knives, and the
Yeah.
like. Yeah, I think it's just pleasing to see that players are embracing many different heroes and many different heroes are winning, and I think that that's important for people to feel motivated and inspired to explore all the game pieces that are available right now.
Totally
I
agree.
actually agree. I think the meta's healthier than it was in the MST meta. But weirdly, all the MST heroes are here. And I think Syndra being better than them is kind of scary, right? But she's better than them in a different way. And Viserai too. So I think there's actually so many more defensive cards that came out. People ran straight to Syndra and they ran straight to Viserai and they ran straight to the MST heroes. And they're like, let's just throw our hands on the table. Aurora, right? Throw my hand on the table, do as much damage as possible. These new cards are shiny. Let's touch them. I think we're going to see a slew of defensive decks start coming back out. People are going to get mad again, and they're going to say aggro's dead again, just like they do every single time somebody finds a breakout defensive deck. But there are so many defensive tools that have just come out in this last set. So many new cost curve cards that actually do interesting things.
Agree. There's so many ripples. You
So
know,
many
you talk
stuff's
about
coming.
the small parcels of damage. Part of the, I guess, downside of trying to do damage that way is you don't have many big attacks in your deck. Does that open a door for something like Prism, which we also saw
Yeah,
win a battle hard
Yeah.
and is putting up very good RTN numbers
Scary
right
isn't it?
now.
Yeah.
And where's Enigma in all of this?
Yeah.
She's around, but she doesn't feel like the same threat she was previously. These go wide heroes really doing an effective job challenging those wards. So there's
Tiny
so many
buttons,
ripples.
tiny
And
pokes. Don't
as
do
soon
Enigma any favors.
as Enigma starts trending downwards, you know the Guardians are going to rise up and look to get be part of the meta.
I think that was
And
intriguing
Reinhardt
to me,
comes
actually.
back.
You know, Prism was just so far behind Enigma in the last meta game. She just struggled, she really, really struggled in that last meta game.
Did.
So it's-
Sixth right now on the leaderboard for RTN season.
Yeah.
So right up there with those top tier heroes.
seeing the script flip on that one, like Prism, or at least at this early stage of the season, seems like the better illusionist
Yep.
right now.
Right now.
They might change.
Yep.
But where it sits right now, Prism's putting up good
Illusionist
numbers.
players
I can't
always
wait
find
to
a
watch
way to
this
make you
RTN
mad.
season unfold. I wish I could be part of
Always.
it. I can't. You can. You can go play at your RTNs. I would certainly be out there battling if I could. So many constant innovations are going to go on throughout these 4 weeks. And that's going to lead us to our Pro Tour, of course. We're headed to London. I know you're going. I'm
Yep.
going. Can't wait.
Love
And
London.
all of these stories get to come to a head
Yeah.
we get there. Are you ready for like early predictions? Is it too soon to start thinking about London or?
I guess a bit early.
Okay.
Let's give me a couple more weeks to
Yeah,
observe
okay.
this Road to Nationals
enough.
data.
That's fine.
The other thing is the Living Legend. We are
London
going to
will
be
be won by
fueling
fatigue deck calling it
a
out.
number of heroes this year. I think our internal prediction is somewhere between 6 to 8 heroes could ascend this year.
Yep.
I think that's incredibly exciting.
Yes.
Can't
wait for
So yeah, obviously new products come out, introduce new, hot heroes like Syndra that shake things up. But again, heroes ascending to Living Legend
Makes a
Have-
huge difference.
just as much, if not more, impact on the texture of metagames as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Road to Nationals evolves. Who we say farewell to.
Yeah.
Looks pretty likely that Viserai will be
He's gone next month.
heading off
Gone.
maybe next week even.
Yeah,
Yeah,
could
I
go as
think
well.
next
There's
week.
Probably
a lot
gone.
of heroes that are right on that cusp. That log jam that we've had at the
Yep.
top of the board finally just going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
bust
Yeah.
open.
What are some of the numbers last year? 14 new heroes, I believe, entered Classic Constructed, and only one left. Throw my left.
left? Yeah.
We had a
Yeah.
big slowdown.
Yeah.
Of
So this year
We're
we're
putting the points into the system. At some
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
they are going to just go ahead and push over, and a bunch of these heroes are just going to be gone from the game. And the new meta games that are left behind are going to be
wait.
ripe for exploration one more time. And I love that constant freshness that we have in
Yeah.
our meta games right now.
and again, players collections. We do have the philosophy that we want players to have utility of their collections over the long run. So yes, your favorite hero, your current hero, may be allowing, but your cards will be good in another hero either immediately or in the near to mid future.
Yeah, we saw that with Jarl bringing back that Elemental Guardian set. I'm sure there's many more surprises along
Yeah.
the way. Any
Jeremiah's
surprises
coming.
we're giving out
What?
today? No surprises today, right? This is just a low key talk about our points type stream.
Does High Seas have pirates in it?
Look, everyone is
better.
convinced. I'm just saying, High Seas in and of itself is not indicative of pirates. There's so many things in the ocean.
on!
There's so many things.
Come
It's
on.
just not a guarantee.
creature.
High Seas has pirates in it.
There's gonna be a crab brute. My birthday. Find my birthday. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.